Good morning. It's Tim and Tim, Tuesdays at 10. So excited. Making moves in multifamily. Glad to be here. Co-host Tim Vest. What's up, man?
Hey man, good morning. How are you doing?
Hey, man. I went to the gym this morning and I'm pumped up, full of energy, ready to go.
Yeah, I was in my garage gym this morning as well. So it's
Nice.
always a good way to kick off the day, huh?
I should send you a picture. I brought my wife with me this time and she was doing some workouts and I got a picture of her like on the bench, just like, bah.
Like taking a nap.
Yeah. All right. So this week, I wanted to talk about networking. Tim, you and we had a conversation recently about the reach that we have now with different people in our networks because of the different masterminds and things that we talked about joining. So yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about where we started with networking and where our mindsets were when we were just getting started in multifamily. And look, we got a lot of comments here today. I guess Tim and Tim Tuesdays at 10 work for people that they can, they can tune in and see us.
It just rolls right off your tongue.
And it does. It just sounds so good.
It does.
So yeah, all right. So networking. We had the conversation about how our network has grown so substantially that we have people pretty much throughout the East Coast that we know, like, and trust that we would absolutely do business with. And that really opens us up to being able to get into different markets. That's the end result of months and months and months and years of networking and building relationships and going to events and things like that in order to meet people in person. But it wasn't always that way. I remember when you and I first met, networking was kind of difficult because I know that I'm very extroverted, clearly, because I don't like to shut up. But I know that for you, you're a little more introverted and it's a little difficult to kind of get a conversation going and putting yourself out there. So, I know that your first mentor was huge in that space and pushed you in that right direction. But where was your mindset at when you first started with networking?
Yeah, you're spot on. When it comes to introvert, extrovert, it's like you and I are like yin and yang on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always been kind of the guy that is much happier being behind the curtain than in front of the crowd. I'll do my thing over here. Tim, you go out there and get the crowd pumped up and be the face. Yeah, I've always said, hey, I'm cool with that. I had a mentor about 2 years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago, that I specifically sought him out for networking. I knew I needed to change my mindset if I was going to do this multifamily thing and scale it. In the single family space, you can make some pretty good inroads with your own money. I mean, obviously it's easier to scale if you have investors. But in multifamily, me with $50,000 was going to take a long time. So I knew I needed to grow my network. I knew bigger deals are harder to come by. So I was going to need to grow my network in that way. So I sought this mentor out, and he just, the very first thing he did with me was change my mindset on
How do you do that?
How do you do that? It was a Jedi mind trick. He was just like, you're gonna go network, that kind of thing.
Just kicked you out into the crowd and said, good luck.
Yeah, he did a really good job of just talking to me about it, because in my mind, I had already decided how raising capital and networking worked, right? You went into a room in my mind and you said, I need $25,000. And he was like, man, that's not how you do this. He's like, you can, but that's probably not the most effective way. He's like, just talk to people. He's like, you can talk to people, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm really good one-on-one.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You put me in a room. You put me in a room with like 50 people that I don't know, and I'm probably going to be the guy sitting on the couch just kind of watching the game on TV. But you put me one-on-one with somebody, and I do all right. I'm comfortable with that. And that was his thing. He was like, hey, most of these are one-on-one conversations. You're going to build a network. You're going to use social media to build a network, and then you're going to have one-on-one conversations. He was like, you can talk to somebody about their day, about their goals, what their kids are doing. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. He's like, okay, cool. Well, let's take that approach. And that's kind of how we started changing my mindset, right? It was really kind of like getting me out of my own way, because the biggest thing that I had done, the biggest mistake I had made was I had determined ahead of time what the process was without actually doing the process. I
So
had
that,
already
I mean,
decided
by
I didn't like
definition, that's a limiting
something,
belief
right?
through and through.
What's that?
By definition, that's a limiting belief
I
through
think
and
you're on
through.
mute.
What? Am I muted? Can you hear me? No? Yes? No?
Nope, still can't
What
hear you.
happened? Hold
Sorry,
on.
folks, having a few technical difficulties.
How about now?
No,
What happened? God
yeah,
dang.
while Tim's working on that, let me
Boom, boom.
let me just let me just oh, okay, maybe it's me that can't hear Tim.
Yeah,
Folks are saying they can hear
I
you,
can
so
hear
go
you and they can hear me. Is your sound on your computer? Because I know I had that problem last week. I don't know why.
No, go
What
ahead.
happened?
I got
Can
you,
you?
Tim. That
So it was
that
you.
was that was me. It's like
Oh,
last
wow.
week. That's like last
Oh,
week,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Hey, but just to kind of fill you guys in, last week, Tim and I were sitting in this pre-chat, like trying to get all the mics and everything set up. And he restarted his computer, unplugged everything, plugged it back in, did the whole rigmarole in order to get the microphone working. Turns out my computer was on mute. I turned the sound off my computer. That's why I couldn't hear him.
Hey, I probably needed to restart anyway.
Yeah, right. Well, you're welcome.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
yeah, what I was saying was, by definition, that's a limiting belief that, this is the way the conversation goes and I can't do this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the folks in the chat are 100% right. That, and you're right. That was a limiting belief completely, and that's really how the mindset shift started to work. Is he just said, don't predetermine what the process is. Right, was the biggest thing, and then he just had me have some conversations. I had conversations with him, I had conversations with some other people in the mentoring group, and that just kind of warmed me up on the process, right? There's it's like everything, right? No better way to learn than to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Than just do it. And that's kind of where it started, really.
Yeah. Oh, I remember, man, when we first met, you were just getting into like LinkedIn posts and trying to get traction there and finding different articles and things. And I remember I talked to you, I was like, Tim, how do you keep finding such good articles? You write like a good blurb about it after you read it, and I think that that's really valuable. But talk a little bit. I mean, because you're huge on LinkedIn now. Like you get constant messages all day, every day on LinkedIn. And then I'm kind of the same way on Facebook. I get a lot of people reaching out, either looking for advice or help with their underwriting their deal or whatever the scenario is. But what did that look like for you when you first started, and how did you overcome those, initial networking fears, by repetition? What did you do?
Man, it was a grind at first.
Of course.
An absolute grind. Like I get pretty good traction on LinkedIn now. Year and a half ago, I mean, I probably spent 6 months of joining every LinkedIn challenge. Yona Weiss's LinkedIn challenge, which is awesome, by the way.
Yeah, shout out
If
to Yona Weiss with that LinkedIn challenge on LinkedIn. That definitely works.
yeah, if anybody here is looking to grow their network, connect with Yona, get involved with his LinkedIn challenges.
Yeah, hey, everyone, reach out to Yona Weiss and tell him your story and why you want to be on his podcast. My episode is airing in a couple weeks. I don't know exactly when, but I know that that's going to be huge publicity for me on the LinkedIn world in order to grow my network.
So is there going to be the shot on your podcast of you on the ski lift? I mean, is that
I really hope so, because hitting the
what sold
slopes
me?
with Yona, man.
Yeah.
What better day?
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, so the first 6 months, I had nothing on LinkedIn. Nothing. It got very frustrating actually, because I was every day posting. I was interacting. I was doing all the things they tell you to do to kind of work within the LinkedIn algorithm, behind the scenes that puts your posts out there. And then all of a sudden, about 7 months in, it started to take off. I would log in and I'd have 5 network requests or connection requests, and then one day I'd have 7. And I remember one day I hit like 15 in one day, and I was like, whoa, you know, I mean, that
Time to
blew my
hire a
mind.
VA.
Yeah. I started shopping for VAs right there on the spot. But yeah, I mean, it just those first 6 months are a grind, and it can be kind of deflating. But then the next thing you know, I met a guy down in Mobile, Alabama. I met another guy down in Alabama. They connected me with a couple of people, and things really, really started to take off. And like you said, like today, I got to apologize to some people on LinkedIn because I'm absolutely I get enough direct messages that I'm actually starting to get way behind in responding to people. So maybe I need to look at a VA for that.
No, managing a LinkedIn, managing any social media account is a full-time job. My wife's like, every time she comes upstairs, you can see the doors open right there. Every time she comes upstairs, are you really working? And I'm like, yes, but you're on Facebook. I'm like, yes, this is work
Yeah,
for me.
yeah. My wife does the same thing. She'll walk in and she's like, "You're just chatting with people on LinkedIn." And I'm like,
That's right.
"Yeah, that's work." But here's so I'll ask you about this, and maybe some people can post comments about this. Here's my struggle with a VA because I am kind of at that point now where I think I probably need to have somebody help me out with my social media. But one of the pieces of feedback I get from a lot of folks is they like the genuine voice, right?
Mhm.
They like my voice. They like that they can tell that it's me. And I'm worried that a VA is not going to do that and be able to kind of keep that going. Um, and that's probably one reason that's one of the things I haven't turned loose of. Because I'm all about, hey, if I can find a VA to help out, let's do it. But this is one of those places that I've kind of struggled letting go.
Dude, you should talk to Brian Briscoe. When we were at the Jake and Gino event, I had a conversation with him about it, and that's what he was saying was, he did hire a VA, and he does have like some canned responses, but ultimately the goal is to push somebody to like your Calendly link and have a 15-minute conversation with them because you're gonna get more ground covered in a 15-minute conversation than you could on an hour texting chat back and forth on LinkedIn. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you kind of have to think about, the responses and making them seem genuine because they are genuine. They're from you. They're just not, from from the horse's mouth, at that very instant. But ultimately, the goal is to have like a 15-minute conversation with somebody so that you can really build a connection and an understanding between two people very quick. I mean, you can cover a lot of ground in 15 minutes. I
Yeah,
mean, look, it's just for example, it's 12 minutes and 40 seconds right now. Look how much ground we covered in already.
Oh, are we done?
No,
Okay.
not yet. You're not off the hook yet.
All right. Yeah, you know what? You made a key point, and we're talking about networking. It's taking that next step, right? It's having that actual conversation. Because I think one thing that people mistake here, and this is just my opinion, is that in the social media world, and I don't want to go into a whole piece on that, but in the social media world, I think people think that the conversations stay there. When you're networking and you're trying to do syndications and honestly, you're trying to raise money from people, you really do need to take that conversation to the phone at least. And in a lot of ways, um, you know, we grow that phone conversation into personal in-face meetings whenever possible, right? Like you and I had a number of conversations before we met at Starbucks one day. Um, and there's a number of investors that I have that when we go to conferences, when I'm in the area or something like that, I'll try to reach out and say, "Hey, I'm in the area. Would you want to grab coffee or something?"
Dude, what you just said was so incredibly powerful. And I hope that everyone, like, I want to reiterate the fact what Tim just said is so powerful. He said you make those initial connections on social media, right? Then your next step by taking action is getting it to a phone conversation to build that relationship. And the third step is to meet these people in person. And the best way you can do that is at conferences, masterminds, et cetera, things like that. Or like if you're touring a property and you got some investors in the area, take an extra day on your trip and go like have coffee with one, lunch with another, and dinner with another. And yeah, it's work, right? Going out and driving all over the place and doing these things. But if that person's going to invest 100, 200, $500,000 with you over the next couple of years, like you want to build that relationship, you got to put in that effort. But at the end of the day, it's all building a funnel, right? You're building this huge funnel by networking on social media. I mean, that's why we do these videos, right? I mean, because we want to provide value to you guys, but we also want to attract people, investors and deals to us over time as well. And by us doing these videos, getting to know us, and then, setting up a phone call with us, and then potentially having a meeting with us whenever we're in person, that's the funnel, the grand funnel of being able to raise capital, for whatever deal that you're working on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The other thing too, when we're talking about networking, is like, let's get away from social media for a second. Podcasts.
Yeah.
Yeah, podcasts have, for me personally, been huge. Another little shout out here. The second podcast I ever did was with Whitney Sewell. And for those of you who don't know, Whitney's out of Virginia. Pretty big syndicator. Does a really good job. Great
He
guy.
does the syndication show, right?
Mm-hmm.
I actually have my interview with him, I think either this week or next week. I gotta check my calendar.
I will be curious to see how that goes, because even to this day, that was one of the the biggest pieces of response I got was from that podcast. And even to this day, I still have people like a year later who are like, "Hey, I heard you on his episode, whatever. I'd like to talk." And that was a year after the podcast was done. His podcast was big. Podcasts in general, those are huge. In fact, I had a conversation yesterday with someone who heard me on a podcast like a month and a half ago. They went into my investor portal, signed up right after they heard it, and then yesterday they had a conversation. They called me up and wanted to have a conversation, and all because of a podcast.
Yeah, dude, and that podcast with Whitney set you up exactly for what I know that this is Jason Veal. You need to go in and allow StreamYard to show your name on here, but that podcast set you up for future success to be on the Joe Fairless podcast. And when you start getting onto those huge big name podcasts, and your name gets out there, and how many downloads that they get, I mean, you're growing your network once that recording is done, right? The 30 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever, it's there forever. So that the power of that networking is continually compounding and growing every single day, because what happens is, they can Google you, right? They can Google Tim Vest, and it's going to come up with every podcast you've ever been on, and they can go through and they can listen to all of them. Hell, I know I did that when I first heard about Tim Bratz. I was like, wait a second, I got to know more about this guy. So I Googled him and I listened to every podcast that Tim Bratz was on, to kind of get an understanding of who he is, how he operates, et cetera, and so forth.
Yeah, that's key. And thanks, Jason. Hope you enjoyed the best ever podcast. That one was big for me. I remember when I first started doing this stuff. Joe Fairless was like one of the first guys that I had kind of came across. Joe Fairless and Michael Blank, right? Those are like two of the big ones that I found first. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, man, if I was ever on his podcast, and hey, there it is. It happened.
Manifested it.
Yeah, it just kind of came true, right? Those are huge. And one of the biggest things, I had somebody ask me yesterday, they were like, what's it like being on a podcast? Because she was actually getting ready to go on to, I think, maybe her second podcast ever, right after we got off the phone. And she was asking, she was like, do you ever get nervous? And it was like on the very first one I ever did.
Mm-hmm.
I was, the anticipation just kind of had me sweating a little bit, right?
Yeah, of course.
Again,
it's growth. That's growth.
Extrovert.
Yeah.
Not me. But from there on out, I got a piece of advice from the first podcast I ever did was with Mike Ely. Mike Ely kind of talked to me after the podcast. He was like, hey man, just be yourself. He had a little feedback for me after the podcast. He was like, just be yourself. And that's, again, that was great advice. Cause from there on out, I've just always been like, you know what, I'm just going to go in and have a conversation, just be genuine, be myself. And I think that's a big key to doing those things.
Yeah. And by the way, if anybody's looking to be a guest on this show, reach out to either one of us, because we're always looking to have, either good operators on here, or people that are looking to just start, like, getting started, that want to ask questions. there's value in hearing everybody's story about where they are in the process, because you might have a question that somebody else has that they're too afraid to ask. So reach out if you're interested in being on the show. We'd love to have you, and we'll get you on the schedule in order to make that happen.
Yeah, and doesn't matter where you are, right? Reach out. Power of the internet. I think you got somebody coming up pretty soon who's in the Middle East.
Yeah. She's out in Kuwait.
Yeah, so looking forward to that one.
Yeah. She's a rock star, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So networking, the power of networking. We talked about how we got started. We talked about the outlets that we're using. Facebook, LinkedIn, podcasts are huge. What are some things that you think are going to help you continue to grow that network with the idea and kind of the motive of continuing to gain relationships with other operators in the industry so that you can expand into other markets, which essentially is more deal flow, and also attract more investors?
Yeah. So a few things for me. One, this is going to sound weird. Having conversations with my 13-year-old daughter. When it comes to social media, she's my expert. Yeah. In fact, I was pinging her last night. I was driving her to soccer practice. I was like, all right, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. I was like, where should I go next? And
TikTok.
yeah, she's trying to talk me into TikTok.
Oh,
we were literally having a conversation between Instagram and TikTok.
really?
Yeah. So
I used to be big into Instagram when I was a consumer. I used to have like a show, Volkswagen, and had quite a few thousand followers on there because I posted pictures of my car all the time. But then once I stopped posting pictures of my car, it kind of fizzled really quickly. But I don't know. I struggle with Instagram. I know my wife has got a pretty big following on Instagram, but it's a tough one.
I struggle with TikTok. I mean, I in my head.
What, you gonna do the dances?
Yeah, and see in my head, that's what I see on TikTok, right? I'm like, so I'm gonna get on there. I'm gonna have like the harvest dance. Maybe that's what
the harvest dance. I like that.
I don't know what it's gonna be. My wife says I do a pretty sweet reverse running man, so maybe that'll be it.
Or moonwalk.
No, I can't. I'm not. Socks on a linoleum floor, maybe, but yeah, other than that, no.
Cheater.
Yeah. But where were we going with that? Oh, so conversation with my daughter. Expanding my reach on social media. One of the biggest ones for me in the last year has been masterminds and mentorship groups. It's great to have those from the standpoint of getting the coaching and having the access to the coach and to the mentor. But one of the biggest things in those that have come out of those for me has been those networking opportunities. Because you can go to the big 900 person events, and I fully recommend that people do that. Those are worth the $250. But there's something special about getting into a mastermind group with 20 or 30 people and the networking opportunities that presents to you. Typically, that's a room of 20 people who are going to do something or have done something. And, that's a big key here, is making sure that you're connecting with people who are expanding your network very efficiently. And, that you're connecting with people who, really, really want to do this thing, and taking strides to make progress here. So that's been huge. The mastermind and the coaching has been huge from a networking standpoint. Are you seeing any of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, going to those large events is definitely part of the larger funnel, which allows me to kind of speed date a lot of people and meet a lot of people that I recognize and see every day on social media. But agreed with the smaller 20-person groups that really allow you to build really strong relationships with, because when you do business with somebody, you're getting into like a 5 to 7 year or more even relationship, right? So you want to be able to know, like, and trust that person. And I have a really simple rule of thumb is that I'm not going to do a deal with somebody if I'm not going to invite you over for dinner on Sunday, right? Because yes, there's a lot of good people out there. Don't get me wrong, but I like to use this analogy that I had come up with on the fly, was that, you're a puzzle piece. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of puzzle pieces out there, and a lot of pictures can be made with different puzzle pieces. But finding the picture that you fit in with is most important, because you're going to pick each other up where, other people are, where your weaknesses are. Somebody else in your picture is going to pick you up, and, et cetera and so forth. Right. So knowing what picture you belong in and what picture you feel comfortable in, and that you're providing the most value to your group, but also receiving the most value because they're doing the things that you're not good at, or maybe you don't like. So going to those large events are important, because you want to continue to grow your overall presence and build your funnel. And then going to the smaller mastermind groups really kind of builds this different type of personal relationship, that you just can't get when you speed dating somebody at a 800 person conference, because you can only have a 10-minute conversation or 15-minute conversation with so many people over the course of a day or two before you're like completely gassed after, saying your elevator speech like 40 times a day.
Yeah. And I think you got a good analogy going on there. I like the speed dating comment. Because, you mentioned something before about you're not going to do a deal with somebody you won't bring over for lunch or dinner on Sunday. And let me know when I can come over and eat. But I've seen what you can whip up on that that Komodo Joe thing, man.
Man, moving, that was the hardest thing for me to get rid of when I moved, was my Komodo Joe. But
Yeah.
don't worry, I will get another one, and there shall be more barbecue.
Hey, yeah, do a deal with Tim, because those ribs look pretty sweet. So anyway, where was it going? So doing a deal with somebody really is a partnership, and I can't imagine speed dating and then proposing to somebody right there on the spot. Same thing with like a partnership, right? Like, having a 5-minute conversation and then entering into a 5-year relationship with them. And because let's be honest, sometimes in this current market, people are getting out of deals in 12 months, 2 years, that kind of thing. But a lot of these are 5, 6, 7, even 10-year relationships. And you better know the people that you're partnering with. Because, come on, we got some banter going on here, but there's times when we have tough conversations, right? Like for those of you who may not know, Tim and I are in some deals together. And some of those conversations can be tense, can be hard. And making sure that you have a good partner who understands that it's just a conversation and it's not personal, and that you got to be open and candid with each other. That's
Yeah.
a key. That's a huge
Man, that's
key.
huge.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on here a second. We got a question here. A lot of small business advice outside of real estate is to never take on partners, as things can get messy down the line. What's your opinion on why real estate works differently in terms of trust and relationship building? My God, Ryan, that one is amazing. You have any initial kickbacks?
Yeah. So, for those of you who may or may not know, I've had a number of small businesses inside and outside of real estate. I've had a couple of them in real estate and outside of real estate that did not end well. I'll just be quite frank with you. They did not end well. In looking back at every one of those, it was because expectations weren't set up front. Um, Expectations weren't set up front, and maybe the partnership agreement, the LLC agreement, the operating agreement, whatever you want to call it, wasn't it kind of left out some things. That was early on 2005, 2006 for me. And looking back at it, that's kind of what I found. Personally, I like partners in business. I've done businesses by myself. I've done them with partners. I much prefer it with partners. Just because they scale much better. Um, I don't, in terms of why it works better with real estate, I don't know that that's necessarily true, just in my experience. Because like I said, I've had it go both ways with inside and outside of real estate. Um, I think in the real estate world, I don't know. I just know that in the real estate world that I've never entered into a partnership with somebody that I didn't know well. And the one time that I did, I knew one of the 4 partners well. And the issue ultimately came down between the partners who entered into the agreement without knowing each other ahead of time.
So I got a little, I got a little something on this. So one of the partners that we're doing a deal with currently, he owned his own business for more than 20 years, and he was the only guy, right? He didn't end up bringing in a COO to help him out, right? But he was the CEO, and he brought in a COO in order to help with the operations of things. And he ultimately recently sold that business and wanted to get out of it, and is now doing real estate full time. And from his perspective, which I can understand, I can't say that I've personally experienced, but I can understand where he said, when you get into the world of real estate, I've never met a group of people that are so willing to help each other. Everyone in real estate really lives, for whatever reason, I don't understand why, but everyone seems to live this life of abundance, or most people. I mean, 95% of people, right? You're going to have your bad eggs, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of people are there because they want to help you and lift you up, and make sure that you're successful and you don't make mistakes. And hell, I had a conversation literally last night with somebody, and I could have easily charged him by the hour for the stuff that we went over and we talked about. But I just had a conversation with him because I genuinely wanted to help. So for whatever reason, the trust and the relationship building just seems to be different. And my own personal take on that is, I think it's because you're dealing with people's livelihood, right? I mean, you're dealing with where people live on, on a 12-month contract, at least in apartment buildings and things like that, right? Or month to month. But you're dealing with where people rest their head every day. And that's a really big burden to carry. And nobody should wish that anybody is not successful in real estate, because yeah, you like the operator might look bad, but think about the people that are being impacted by that person not being successful. I mean, they own 500 units, for example, and they operate it terribly and they fail. Did one person fail, or did 500 people get, I don't want to say that they failed, but that they, their expectations weren't met or whatever.
Yeah, that's Ryan. That's a really, really good question. You're making me think over here, even
Yeah,
as
man, that was a good one. I like
yeah,
it a lot.
yeah, because I'll be honest, in 15 years, most of the advice I've gotten, even inside and outside of real estate, is find partners who complement your skill set, and that's yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting take. I'll definitely have to take that offline and think about that one a little bit.
Yeah, definitely caught me on my heels with that one. But
Yeah,
yeah, I agree. I mean, there's so much to do when it comes to real estate that it's almost impossible to do it all yourself. I mean, when you and I are looking at deals, I do the underwriting and I tell you, hey, like, don't worry about anything else. Just go get me this number, right? When you can separate those two mentally tasking tasks, right? And it gives you more clarity and focus around the things that you need to, in order to make sure that us as a group are successful. So you say, all right, well, Tim, what number do I need to be at? And you don't care about any of the details. All you need to do is focus on the negotiation with the broker, right? And when I was going through a deal that I was underwriting and negotiating, it was stressful. Like, my God, I lost sleep over it, because I'm sitting there, trying to make sure I'm not falling in love with the deal, trying to make sure that I'm not getting influenced by the broker. It's really a segregation of duties that takes, two of the most difficult tasks and puts it between two different people, so that collectively you can come together to, be successful. So
yeah, yeah, and it's always good to get that second opinion, right? Like,
yeah, it keeps you honest.
you're talking about the underwriting, like literally right before the show, I just put together something I've been working on for a few weeks now. Send it over to Tim here to check out my underwriting and and keep me honest. Because I'll be honest, it's you mentioned falling in love with a deal. I don't tend to fall in love with deals. I tend to fall in love with areas,
Yeah.
and this isn't an area I really really like. So
Hmm.
I'm going to need Tim's eyes on in his head on it to make sure that I'm not looking at something blindly.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, that's powerful. That's really powerful.
yeah,
So
and calling that kind of thing out. So, but yeah, I mean that's a really good point. I love the fact that for the most part I can go out and focus on having conversations with brokers, building relationships with brokers directly, and sellers. And then, I know Tim's got the underwriting taken care of, when the time comes, it really allows me to focus on those other pieces.
Right. So find people that complement what you're terrible at, ultimately. Because if you grow your network, you're going to find people that love to do what you hate to do. And together, you guys can accomplish something awesome.
I
So
think Tim just called me terrible at underwriting.
you are terrible. And no, I'm just kidding. You're okay.
I'm not the best, that's for sure.
All right. Well, that's all we got for today. Thanks for tuning in for Tim and Tim at Tuesdays on 10. We'll be live again next week with Keisha Kennedy. She's the out in Kuwait that we just talked about. She's going to be live on our show, and we're going to talk about what she's doing. And, she's getting into for her first GP deal that she's raising money on. So we'll talk about what that experience is like and what's going through her head, and hopefully provide some value to you guys to borrow her belief that if she can do it, you can do it. Because hell, if we can do it, anybody can do it.
Yeah, definitely tune in for that one. Keisha's awesome. Great perspective, and it'll give you a nice insight into someone who's just kind of getting into their GP journey.
Definitely. Cool. All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week.